Okay, well, welcome, dear viewers and dear listeners, to another episode of navigating the new normal in the workplace with Len Adams, CEO and founder of ACG Resources. Welcome, Len.
Thank you. Good morning, Michelle, and good morning, listeners and viewers. Happy to be here again.
Yeah, it's great to
Hope
see
you're
you.
not getting tired of me.
No, well, I'm not, and I know the listeners and viewers aren't because the numbers look good for
Good, terrific.
our series, which is good. I think
Yeah,
it
I'm having a
shows.
good time.
Yeah, me too, and it shows that um, you know information is key in helping anyone in
Yes,
their career.
absolutely.
And that's what we're here for today, Len.
Today's surprise topic.
The surprise topic is something that shouldn't be a surprise in the workplace or while you're interviewing, and it's salary negotiations.
Yes, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Okay,
mm-hmm.
that's a good one. That's the
Salary,
one that stumps everybody all the
it's
time.
it stumps everyone all the time, Len, and I'll tell
On
you.
both sides, by the way.
Oh, okay.
On both
Well,
sides.
well, you know, a lot of my clients have been asking about, Michelle, what's the best way to salary negotiate? And so I thought this would be a great time to bring it up, hear your perspective on it. So why don't we start with what are the thoughts that come to mind, Len, given your experience at ACG about salary negotiations?
Okay. Well, let me back into this, and I guess it was I don't know if it's a year or 2 years ago when,
Mhm,
particularly in New York, they passed the salary question ban,
mhm,
and for me, I almost went into panic mode because for 40 years that I'm doing this, the first question I would ask any candidate is, what are you making? Okay,
yes.
and I had to retrain not only myself but my staff and tell them you can't ask that anymore.
Mhm,
Okay. And I'm still on the fence as to whether that was a fair question or not. But I have to tell you, I went into panic mode about it because I said, how are we going to really manage the
mhm.
negotiation process? And I have to tell you, it became a non starter for us. It actually made it, I think, easier because it forced us and it forced clients to pay what the market is rather than base it on someone's past salary.
Right.
So in hindsight, I think it was a good law. I didn't think so at the time when it first came, but now I believe it was a good law because it allows people to be paid market rates. Um, and I use a statement all the time in any job search or any open position. There are three numbers. There's the number that the client thinks they want to pay.
Right.
There's the number the candidate thinks they're worth, and
Mhm.
then there's the number that the market dictates. And
Okay.
that's really the true number. Okay. Unfortunately, clients many cases, not always, feel that maybe they could save some money off their budget, and candidates think that they can hit the golden ring, grab
Sure.
the golden ring by getting a 50% increase.
Mhm.
Okay, and neither one of those scenarios are fair or truthful. Okay, the market really dictates where the number should be.
Okay.
Okay, and I think if everyone approaches it from that viewpoint, candidates should be paid fairly. Okay, and there are a lot of scenarios that they have to look at. One is where I'm coming from.
Mhm.
Am I paid a market rate? Sometimes people are underpaid. Sometimes if they've stayed in a role a very long time, they haven't caught up to the market because they're getting 2% increases or 3% increases. So, if you start at a certain number and you go out 5 years with a 2% increase, after 5 years, your salary went up 10%. Well, you're probably not keeping up with the marketplace then.
That's right.
So, so you have to factor that in. Okay, but it is sometimes unreasonable for a candidate to say, "Well, I'm worth 50% more,"
Mhm.
because that's probably not going to happen. So, I always suggest to candidates be reasonable about your expectation. Look at the responsibilities, look at the role, and clients don't care that you have a big mortgage or tuition or car payments. It's not their problem. Their problem is they have a budget for the role and they want to fill it. Now, the flip side is if a client is replacing someone, let's talk about the reasons a position is open.
Okay.
They're replacing someone, and that person was making 75.
Right.
And the band for that job was 60 to 90.
Mhm.
Okay. It happens sometimes, not all the time. They go, okay, let's start the band again. Let's start at 60.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's reasonable because that may be the band, but that may be where the band was 3 years ago. Okay. So if you were paying someone 75 and they left for whatever reason, you were replacing them or they resigned,
Mhm.
someone is probably worth 75. Maybe you have to go to 80 to attract someone. But, you know, we always tell clients, be reasonable. Don't use that opportunity to save money. Use the opportunity to bring in talent at a rate that's worth it. Because all you're doing, if you come down on the band and if you're trying to replace somebody with 5 years experience with someone else with 5 or 6 years experience, then you don't try to bring the band down. If you're going to replace them with someone with 2 years experience, then you can go to the bottom of the band, right? Because then it makes sense. That's the reason for bands. It's based on experience. It's not based on, well, I'm replacing someone, so I'm going to start fresh again. So, you know, it's a matter of being realistic and reasonable on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you've touched on a lot of important points here. But
There's a lot of
also,
psychological stuff in there too.
absolutely, but most importantly, you've given a perspective from the corporate side, right? A lot of folks don't think about it like that. They think about it, oh, this is my opportunity to make some money. I'm going to ask for the highest, but there is a strategy to it, right? There's a formula to it. You mentioned the market rate and the 3 numbers, which I love. Let's talk about some stats here. According to the Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM is the short, you know, the acronym for it. Mm-hmm. 46% of men negotiated salaries versus 34% women. But yet 84% of those negotiating a higher salary got it. So now we're talking about who's applying the strategy and who is going ahead and negotiating appropriately. Let's talk about research. You got to research, right, Len?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, people say, well, how do I get a good idea of what the numbers are? Well, if you first of all, Google tells you everything now, okay? And there are a number of salary surveys and free salary surveys out there that will give you a rough idea. And I think most people have a sense for what the value is of positions in the marketplace. And, you know, we're in a unique position in the recruiting world is that we see salaries. Now, even though we can't ask anymore, we have history in our database when we were able to ask. So I can look back and see what people were making 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I can extrapolate that out into where the numbers should be today, okay? Now, there are some other factors that affect salary negotiations and salary ranges, and that's market forces, right? When you're in a market where there's low unemployment and low availability of people, then tends to drive the salaries up a little bit, particularly when you're trying to replace someone because you have to attract someone. All right. In high unemployment, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, it may sometimes depress the salaries if there's a lot of people available in a particular position. Now, listeners and viewers, we have very high unemployment today, but bear in mind, don't just look at unemployment numbers. Look at your industry and your field. High unemployment today is the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, the airline industry, travel and tourism. That's what's driving the unemployment numbers up. It's not so much in every other industry. So don't let people point to the numbers and say, well, there's a lot of people out there. Well, you know what? I could tell you from our searching and trying to fill jobs, there are not a lot of people out there in certain sectors. So, you know, we're working harder and harder to find people. So in certain sectors, it should not depress the salaries. But yes, research, find out what you're worth, you know, look at where you are today, and, you know, talk to people, you know, talk to friends, talk to colleagues, You know, everyone, I don't think it's a good idea. I know it's not a popular, sentiment. You know, I don't think it's a good idea to compare salaries with everyone.
Oh, I agree.
Uh,
I
but,
agree.
but, but, you know, you get a sense for where people are. Okay. And again, be reasonable. You know,
Well,
I'm
let's
going to tell
go
you
back to
quick.
that.
I'm going to tell you a quick personal
Okay.
story.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. You ask me your
No,
question
no,
first.
no, 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 no. You mentioned a point I really wanted to touch on because you're saying people shouldn't compare. Yet, I hear a lot about, well, I found out this person's making more than me. Now, in certain cases, the chances are that person is probably male and has been in a position for a certain period of time. Someone comes in and realizes, wait a minute, why is this person getting paid more than me? And we're doing the same job. So what would your feedback be, right? For a scenario like that, let's say someone realizes, hey, I just found out this guy or this person is making more money than me and we're in the same job. What do you suggest they do?
I suggest they be prepared to have a discussion with their manager, okay, and talk about their value and their worth and their job performance rather than point a finger to Joe, who's in the cubicle next to me, and say, he's making more than me. Okay, if you point out the value and the worth, and I think a smart manager or supervisor will understand what's going on, and they're going to know the numbers. And you know, it may also be, I was caught. And if they're smart, they'll bring them up to market. Because I think it's terribly unfair. I don't think anyone's age, race, creed, sex should have any bearing on what they're being paid. They should be paid based on what is the job worth and what is the person's experience and value worth to that job. Period.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely. Period.
That's right. That's why I wanted you to expand on that because you said knowing your worth. I want to touch on that, but I want to go back to that story that you had, Len. Go ahead.
Okay, well, very, very quickly, years and years ago, before I started my business, and I was working for someone else for many years, and I was terribly underpaid. And someone had approached me, a competitor, they wanted to hire me. And this was before they couldn't ask, and they said, well, what are you making? And I said, well, I'm going to tell you. I said, but I'm not being paid what my value is, you know, what I bring into the business and the amount of business I bring in. I said, I just want to be treated fairly. And so I told them, and they made me an offer, and they matched what I was making. I said to them, you're insulting me. I said, I told you I'm underpaid. And I really was. I was underpaid by probably 50%, but it was the whole long story why I stayed. All right. I said, so you just insulted me. Okay, so I turned it down, which was the best thing I ever did because a year later I went on my own. And so I'm really glad that I didn't acquiesce to his number.
Look at that.
But he pulled that number because he went by what. Now, if I didn't tell him what I was earning, he probably would have offered me way more based on what I was bringing to the table.
Okay.
Okay. So it just ratifies that the value of the law that was passed 2 years ago.
That's right. And this was years ago, right?
This was years ago.
This was years ago. This was years ago. I'm glad you brought that story up because you knew your worth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And let's just talk about that for a minute, because before you go into any negotiation, you got to know your worth, right?
And you got to know the number you're going to draw the line in the sand on.
Exactly. Now, I'm just going to go back to the worth for a minute because people are like, oh man, Michelle, you know, whatever. No, it's not whatever. If you don't know what your worth is, if you don't know what you're bringing to the table, if you don't know your value, how is someone else going to see it?
Right. Absolutely. If you don't believe it, how could they?
Exactly. And this is something that tends to be overlooked.
Yes.
So I wanted to emphasize that.
And I will agree with you. Although I wouldn't say this about most women because a lot of women are very aggressive, but some women tend to maybe step back and say, well, I'm not going to negotiate that because they offered me this. All right, fine. But they probably shouldn't do that. But I also say, I couch it by saying, be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just because you think your worth is 50 or 60 or 70% more doesn't mean the market will hold that to be true.
Absolutely.
So you have to look at the job, look at your reasons for leaving. Let's talk about, you know, when you're making a move, you know, are you really unhappy? So is it worth it? I'll give you a scenario. you're making 75,000 in a job and you absolutely hate it, and you go to another interview and they offer you 80. And you say, well, I really wanted 85. Okay. So now you have $5,000 apart. So now your options are try to negotiate it up, try to negotiate some kind of a balance between the 80 and 85. Maybe it's 82.5. Maybe that's the number. Okay. And then recognize, what's it worth for me to get out of my current situation, to go somewhere else? You know, would you rather be miserable at 75 or happier at 80? Okay.
Well, okay, Len. You know, hey, we're here to discuss different viewpoints.
Right.
I respect your feedback. I think it's interesting. Because I've been there, I would not recommend anyone to stay in a gig that they're not happy in.
Right.
But it's about being.
But don't just move for the sake of moving.
But don't move just for the sake of moving.
Right.
Move because you want to, because the motives behind your move will determine whether or not you're sustainable in your next step. What do I
Yes.
mean by that? If you're just moving for the money, well, you know what? That's all you'll be considered as a dollar sign for the next company, and then you'll probably be unhappy again.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say, don't move for money. Early for money.
Oh my goodness, Len.
We didn't rehearse this either, which is great.
Yeah. Don't move for money. Oh, Michelle, oh, Len, you don't know what you're talking about. I've got this bill to pay. I've got that bill to pay.
Nobody cares. Not their problem.
And so that's why you, dear listener and dear viewer, should care. You should care. You should care about yourself enough to know that the next move you make, or the current place that you're in, works for you. So come fully informed, right? This goes back to what you're saying. Have a strategy. Be reasonable, right?
Yes, and look at the whole package too. Don't just look at the base salary. Look at, are there other benefits? Is there a quality of life issue? Can I work from home? You know, which is now a reality of life that wasn't here 7 months ago. Okay, you know, you have to look at the whole situation and then evaluate it when you're making that choice. Okay, and you know, a lot of people make the mistake. Well, I want a 15% increase. They only offer me 12%. All right, what's that 3% worth to you? You know, are there other things? Is there a bonus? Is there quality of, you know, what are those things worth to you? Okay, or is where you are really that terrible? If it's not that terrible, then stay there. You know, this is what I tell people all the time. If you're not that miserable, stay.
Well, okay, fair enough, right? It's a free country. You can do what you want. We're here to just give you information and have you make the best decision for yourself. But let's go back to the incidentals. It was actually my next question. So I think you're clairvoyant because it's on my list here of let's talk about it. Because when you come to the table, not only should you be fully armed with information on how to go about salary negotiating, but you should be fully armed on the right questions to ask, right? Okay, fine. Now,
absolutely.
In reference to the base salary, I'm glad you mentioned it. There is more to the base salary because that's how they're looking at you. They're looking at you from a health insurance perspective, life insurance perspective. You know, that number.
Disability.
Right. Right. So what other incidentals? You've mentioned them. Let's just talk a little bit more about it, because we know that a listener, 2 listeners, 3 listeners out there may be negotiating their salary right now. What else should they come to the table with and ask about?
Okay. See, now again, a lot of things change because, you know, in New York, we have the law for commuter benefits have to be offered, which if you're working from home, that's not something that's important anymore, right? Because you're not commuting.
Right.
Okay, maybe you will be. Mm-hmm. Some companies have a lunch allowance that they offer. Okay, things like that. Vacation, you know, is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? How many personal days? How many sick days? You know, by law, they're mandated to 5. Some companies will give more than that.
Right.
What else is there? Child care allowance, tuition reimbursement, depending on the level of the position. If it's a more senior role, sometimes there's a car allowance, or if it's a sales role, there'll be a car allowance or a car. So, you know, these are all the things you want to look at. Bonus, is there a bonus? Is there 401k? Is there profit sharing? Are there stock options? Okay, these are all things you want to know and evaluate when you look at the package. That's why we always say look at the whole package. Don't just look at a number. Okay, because that 75 or 80 number could actually be 110 when you add everything in.
That's exactly right. And if you're informed, you know your
You
numbers.
can make it. That's right.
So all of these factors play a role in the number you negotiate. Let's talk about equity. I had someone ask me a question about equity. Michelle company approached me and they wanted to offer me a certain amount and equity. What sort of experience have you had, Len, with companies that put that on the table?
A little bit, particularly with the startups. You know, equity is a tricky thing. It depends on if it's real equity. Does the company have a value? You know, is it a startup that may or may not make it? Okay. Now, if it's a startup that may or may not make it and they give you equity, if they make it, you're golden. If they don't make it, the equity was useless, right? So that's a decision you have to make in terms of a chance. Is it worth it? Do I believe in the company? Do I believe in the product or the service? And do I believe that I could contribute enough that I'll help them make it and have that equity mean something to me, right? So that's a decision that has to be made.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we see a lot of startups coming on. And so
Yep.
just be mindful, right, of what stage that startup is in as you negotiate with them. I want to emphasize, you know, when someone offers equity on the table, think about whether or not you want to take, how can I say, if you have the patience to have a long lasting relationship with them.
Yes. You know, some companies, particularly startups, they may offer more in equity and less in salary.
There you go. And I think
there's a risk.
There's a risk.
There's a risk.
There's a risk.
It could be wonderful. Could be great. You know, look at the people that you know, I'll use a company, Uber. I'm sorry, not Uber. WeWorks. People that were offered equity in WeWorks. You know, other than the CEO, a lot of people took a real beating on that one when it fell apart.
They took a real beating on that one.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's to serve as an example of know what you're getting into. I want to emphasize something that you said earlier. Don't look at what the person next door is doing, okay? Don't go, well, I heard such and such got this, so I'm going to do that. Don't do it.
No, because I'll tell you another secret. Everybody lies about their salary.
Exactly.
Everybody. So it doesn't matter what people tell you, okay? When you're negotiating, okay, look within, look at what you bring to the table and your value, okay? And when you're negotiating, talk about what you could do for the company. Always remember this, right? What John F. Kennedy say? Ask not what your country could, what you could do, what your country could do for you. Ask what you could do for your country. It's the same thing. Apply that to your negotiation. What can you do for the company? Okay, and then what the company could do for you will follow. But you have to make the argument as to what you're bringing to the table. If you're in a sales role, you know, I'm going to come in and I'm going to increase your sales by 30% in 6 months. Now there's something to talk about. Now you're bringing something.
That's right. Adding value.
Added value.
Adding value. Now, granted, we've been talking about, right, if you move on to another job. But if you're in your current gig and you're happy and you're saying, oh, I want to ask for a raise, the same rule applies.
Show what you've accomplished. Show what you've done. Okay, you gave me a project and you told me I had 6 months to complete it. I completed it in 3, and it was a success. We had to implement this software. We had 9 months to do it. I did it in 6. Okay, now you're demonstrating what you brought to the table. Okay, and you know, to be fair to a lot of managers, because I don't want to paint managers as these ogres that are trying to take advantage of the little people. You know, you're running a division, you're running a company, you're running a large department. You may not always pay attention to all these little things.
That's
right.
Right.
And they're not little, they're not insignificant, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, what one of my employees is going through, while it's important, I may not see it because, you know, I'm busy running on 9 different projects until they bring it to your attention. Then it's something, then it's a conversation. And if you make it a conversation, and not a threat. Okay? I find people don't respond well to threats. I know if someone comes to me with a threat, my initial reaction is, okay, leave.
There you go.
Go.
Because
No problem.
you're dictating the conversation as
Right.
Yes. Great suggestion, Len.
Have a discussion. Okay? And if you put out your point of view, they may give you their point of view, and you'll meet somewhere in the middle, or not. But it's a discussion. It really should be a discussion.
I agree.
Okay? If you're going with guns blazing, not a good way to approach it.
It's not a good way to approach it. It didn't work in the Wild West, and it's not going to work now.
Nope.
Let's talk about overpaying. How does someone know if they're overpaid?
If they're overpaid, wow, I've never heard that. If they're overpaid.
Their salary was inflated. That's what let me clarify that. They were wooed into a gig and they were given this phenomenal salary, but it really
doesn't feel right. It doesn't. They're being paid because maybe there's something illegal going on, or there's something else there, and they want to keep them quiet. Well,
I think, and I asked you the question, but I have an answer for it, just because I want to hear your thoughts on this. If it's too good to be true, chances are it is.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt.
There you go.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
No
doubt about it.
If someone's offering you, what you're asking and more, if the package is, I'm not saying it's not a possibility, but you see the signs, and if it's too good to be true, think again. Chances are, and I've seen this happen, people get hired at a higher salary, right? And the tactic is to keep them to do the job. And what I see is that they eventually get let go.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and what you said, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. That's absolutely accurate. If it doesn't feel right, it's usually not. Okay. Are there situations where someone really wants to hire someone and they really have skills that they want, and they're in a bidding war with another company because it's a talent or a skill that's in short supply? I don't know that I would consider that to be being overpaid.
Okay.
But you could get into a situation where, because of the bidding war, you look at it in real estate, right? Two houses, okay? You're looking at two houses and you really want one, or there are two buyers, and you go 30% over market, you're probably overpaid.
Okay.
Right? Now, someone may say, well, you paid what the value was at that time. Yeah, but if I go to sell it next year, I may not break even, right? So same thing. If you're overpaid, there may be something else going on. There may be a reason why they wanted to attract you, or they may overpay because they can't get anyone, because it's really a horrible situation when you really get in and you look under the hood and you say, oh, you know what? Now I know why they had to pay me so much, because it's terrible here. The boss yells, they scream, they throw their shoes at me, making up stupid.
I think that's, Len, I printed out a document. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, I went away from my desk here because I wanted to bring out some stats that really, really expand further to what you just said. According to new research on compensation trends amid the COVID-19 era that we're living in, 88% of senior managers worry about losing top talent. 39% say salary reductions and planned salary freezes are to blame. 72% of companies have maintained or upped pay for new hires since the pandemic began. This is according to Robert Half, by the way. 36% of employers are more likely to negotiate compensation with candidates now versus a year ago. And this is I didn't make this up, Robert Half 2021 salary guides. So going back to salary negotiations, if you got your information, if you got your strategy, if you're doing your job, if you're listening to Len and Michelle, and you go in and negotiate well, the company will want to retain you. Because there's no one like you, right, Len?
Absolutely. Everyone's unique and everyone brings talent. If you believe in your skills, okay, and you believe in what you bring to the table, then it's way easier to negotiate because you're negotiating from some position of strength. Okay, I have a skill, you have a need. Okay, let's meet, let's negotiate, let's come to terms, right? If you don't believe in what you do and you don't believe that you have a value to bring to the company, well, then you're gonna shy back and say, well, okay, I guess I'll take it, or all right, I'll take whatever you offer. All right, then you don't want to do that. But again, I caution people: don't have an inflated value of what you're worth, and that's a very, it's very difficult to not do that, right? I know what I think I'm worth. Okay, other people may not believe that, but I know what I think I'm worth. But someone else may not agree with that. Now, I'm not job seeking, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But another company, I look, I get calls every day if people don't want to buy us. Okay, it's a very hot market to buy staffing firms. I know what I would sell for, but I don't want to sell. Okay, and no one would give me the number that I think my company is worth. So, not that I've put a number out there, but I don't think anyone would pay us what I think I would want to get out.
Okay.
So I don't
you
even
never
bother.
know. You just put it out there in the universe.
No, I just put it. Yeah, I know. I just put it out to the universe, right? Maybe I'll get a call next week. But because to me, there are other. It's not just about money. It's what the business, the lifestyle I have, and the work balance, and
That's right.
not having to report to somebody. I don't know
The
that I would
whole
want to report
package.
to someone else at this stage of my life, right? And have my staff reporting to someone else when they've been accustomed to working with me.
That's
good,
right.
good, bad, or indifferent, however that may be. But they work with me, and whether they like it or not, I'm what they got.
That's right.
I think they like it. We have a great team. I have a really wonderful team.
So I think your points were very well taken. Very valuable. We did take a little bit more time on this show, on this episode, Len, because the more time we take on this, hopefully it will decrease the amount of time folks have to go and do the work.
Absolutely.
And salary negotiate on a surer footing. Len, thank you so much. This went so fast.
Thank you. Love it. Love it.
This was fantastic.
Yes.
I'm
I love being surprised every week. This is great.
I'm all right. Well, next week we're gonna come up, and actually we're coming to the end of the series, Len.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna have to negotiate.
I was gonna say I'm gonna negotiate an extension. And viewers and listeners, this really is unrehearsed. I don't know the topic until you know the topic each week, and I want it that way. I keep telling Michelle, don't tell me. This way,
I don't tell
we
them,
can do it completely extemporaneously.
That's right, and that's great. I think it just, it allows you to give, I believe, your full, transparent answer, and I think it makes it fresh. So thank you, Len, for taking the time out.
Thank you for having me again.
Dear listeners, Len, don't go away. Until next week.